Welcome to Inventing Our Future on ThinkTech Hawaii. I'm your host, Brittany Zimmerman.
And I'm your co-host, Richard Ha.
Joining us today is our guest, Mr. Rodrigo Romo. Today, we're going to do a deep dive into our letter B invention. Welcome to the show and welcome, Mr. Rodrigo Romo. How are you?
It's a pleasure being here. I'm fine, Brittany. Thank you. How are you and Richard doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you, Richard.
Yeah, and I'm doing really well, my friend.
Well, it's an honor to be here with you guys today. I'm really looking forward towards our conversation.
Awesome. Us too. And Richard was going to tell us a little bit about a new viewpoint and perspective on Keoku and Malia, and then we'll get into the letter B.
I'm approaching this from the point of view of Kyoki and Malia, who are toddlers today. And we're asking the question, what can we do with the information we have now to make life better for Kyoki and Malia when they're 25 years old, one generation from now? So that's essentially the point of view. I just wanted to say that.
That's an important one, right? It's kind of that long-term view and how it affects the future generations. So thank you so much, Richard. All right, then with that, drum roll, our own sound effects here. This week, the letter B will be Biospheres. And Biospheres may be something that our guest, Rodrigo, may know a thing or two about. Is that right, Rodrigo?
That term sounds vaguely familiar. Yes, I do know a little bit about it.
Wonderful. For the viewers who have had the pleasure of meeting Rodrigo before, and those of you who have not, Rodrigo is very special in the world of biospherics. He has actually lived in something called the Biosphere 2 for a period of time. And so, yeah, Rodrigo, tell us about your experience. What does this mean for those people who may or may not be familiar with biospheres? What is that?
Yeah, that's a good place to start. I mean, I've given talks in recent years to people in high school, and I come with the assumption that everybody knows what the biosphere is or was, and turns out a lot of these kids hadn't even been born when Biosphere was ongoing. So Biosphere 2 was a project built just north of Tucson, Arizona. It was built in the early 90s. And it was, in my opinion, it was a project that was a good 30 years ahead of its time. Biosphere 2 attempted to, like Brittany said, study biospheres, which is a study of how the biosphere is that thin layer that surrounds the planet on which life as we know it exists. So biospherics studies all the interactions that exist between all the closed systems that form that biosphere. So Biosphere 2 was that. It was they're trying to replicate or trying to mimic the biosphere. Earth being Biosphere 1, this was Biosphere 2. The reason why they were doing this was, there was a couple of reasons. One, they had the group of visionaries who built and designed Biosphere 2 were trying to see if it was possible to, one, mimic the biosphere, the planet Earth, with the anticipation of space colonization. You know, build a facility that would sustain human life and that would be self-sustainable. When you look at the planet, planet Earth, it can be considered a closed system in which the only thing that goes in and out is energy and information. Everything else is contained within that biosphere. So Biosphere 2 was the same thing. It was a 3-acre facility built under glass and space frame, in which we hosted a variety of terrestrial wilderness biomes. There was a rainforest, a savanna, a marsh, thorn scrub, desert, and an ocean. And there was also a habitat where people live and an agricultural area. So the idea was to see if we could sustain human life and make it self-sustainable, where we would grow all of our own food, we would recycle all of our water, recycle all of our air, recycle all of our waste, And there was nothing that was allowed to come in or go out of the Biosphere 2 other than samples for laboratory analysis, water samples, air samples, and the like. It was meant to be a 100-year project. So as you can imagine, there was going to be gradual improvements on the performance of the Biosphere 2. Unfortunately, due to internal politics, the project was cut short after 3 years. The first mission was a 2-year mission. Our mission was a 10-month mission. But we managed to grow 96% of our food, recycle 100% of our water, recycle 100% of our air, and recycle 100% of our waste, which was something that had never been done before. And so Biosphere 2 left a really strong impression in me in making me realize how small and how fragile the planet is. And I think it's something that a lot of people would benefit from. I think that they should make it mandatory for high school kids to spend a week in a Biosphere 2 type of facility, because then you realize, that what you're flushing down the toilet today is going to be watering your food tomorrow. That's how close it is. So because we were a closed, self-sustainable system, we're not allowed to bring in chemicals such as pesticides, or any supplemental chemicals for agriculture. It was completely 100% organic agriculture. It was interesting because even though it was a high-tech facility, we had all kinds of conveniences and high-tech technology in there. But the planting system was based on ancient agricultural techniques. Crop rotation was one. So we would rotate our plots to bring nitrogen into the soil and keep nutrient depletion from the soil. We had the rice paddy technology, where it was an ancient Chinese form where you have flooded rice paddies in which you grow tilapias, and the tilapia waste becomes nutrients for the rice. So it was high tech based on ancient ways, and we had some of the highest yields per unit of area in that quarter of an acre that we had to feed 10 people. So we were feeding 10 people in just 1/4 of an acre. Now, that is really among the things that left a strong impression in me. Is Biosphere 2 is very similar or a very good analog as to what it is living on an island, living on Hawaii, for instance. We are our own biosphere, if you want. Right now, the world has shrunken a lot by maritime shipping lanes and air transportation. But if airports were to shut down and ships were to shut down, we should be able to be self-sustainable with the land that we have here on Hawaii. And one of the things that I think that you've done a lot of work with space research is the value of your resources. You cannot, nothing can be wasted. It was the same thing in the biosphere. We could not generate any waste. Everything had to be recycled, reutilized, and reappropriated. We have to do the same thing on Hawaii Island. We cannot depend so much on imports for food, for energy. And so Biosphere left me a different perspective on what it is to live on an island. And that's one of the reasons why my wife and I decided to move to Hawaii. It's kind of moving into a slightly bigger biosphere too.
Yeah, that's amazing. So for 10 months, your wife was in the biosphere with you
Yes.
at the same time?
Yes, she was in charge of all the terrestrial wilderness biomes. So she was a plant person. I was in charge of all the air and water monitoring systems. I was in charge of all the analytical instruments. And I was in charge of the domestic animals. So Biosphere 2 is one of those places where literally, if you don't work in the garden, you don't eat. Everybody had to spend time growing food. So one of the things that I learned, one of the impressions I will have everlasting from Biosphere 2 is growing food is not easy. It's very energy intensive and it's very labor intensive. Our crew consisted of 7 crew members, and we had visiting scientists. We can go that into detail in another talk. But basically, every crew member had to spend time working in the farm, growing food. In average, we each spent about 44% of our time in food growing related tasks. So I was in charge of taking care of all the air and water monitoring systems and other. I was also a safety officer, and still 44% of my time was spent in food growing, either food preparation. I was in charge of all the domestic animals, so I had to learn animal husbandry. You know, I had to learn how to deliver baby goats and how to butcher animals. So it becomes really. It's an eye-opening experience that gives you a very different perspective to the value of food. I mean, when you bring a loaf of bread to the table, when we brought a loaf of bread to the table, that meant we had to grow the wheat, we had to harvest the wheat, we had to thresh the wheat to make flour, and then we had to bake it.
Yeah.
So getting a loaf of bread was a several-month process. You know, if we wanted pizza, the same thing. We had to make the flour. We had to milk the goats to make the cheese. We had to cut the tomatoes to make the sauce. So it's eye-opening. It really gives you a different appreciation to the value of food, and also of how much waste we generate as a society.
Yeah.
You know, Rodrigo, I didn't tell you this before, but you know, the first time I met you guys was in when I went to the controlled environment ag course in Tucson, and you folks had just been in the biosphere, and you were trying to decide then what to do. And I'm sitting there in a room thinking, holy smokes, these people are special people. And this, I'm thinking this to myself now, you know, so we got to have them in Hawaii, you know. So what I did everything I could to try to, you know, convince you guys, but I don't know, you know, it's just, but anyway, so what I wanted to ask you is how did you folks decide to come to Hawaii? And when you folks came to Hawaii, what did you feel like after going to, you know, being in the biosphere?
But it was your fault, Richard. So yeah, we did meet Richard and June, his wife, at a greenhouse engineering short course given at the University of Arizona. My wife was getting her degree in soil and water sciences at U of A, and I was taking some graduate courses in greenhouse engineering. And so as part of the course, we met Richard and June there. We found out they were from Hilo. And at that point, Richard was starting to change his operation from being a banana grower, and he was going to go into tomato growing, hydroponics. And my wife was specializing in hydroponics. She was working with U of A civic people in hydroponic tomatoes. So long story short, we met Richard and June. We parted ways. It was the first people from Hilo that we met. And about a year later, or some months later, I came to Honolulu to give a talk on membrane fouling prevention for RO systems. And before I headed home, I called my wife, Charlotte, and said, hey, you know what, I'm going to hop over to Hilo and go say hi to Richard and see his operation, see what's going on over there. And at that point, my wife and I were looking for a different place where to move, a healthier, a safer place where to raise our kids. You know, we wanted to give them a good childhood. And I remember flying from Honolulu, and the moment I landed in Hilo and stepped out of the plane, it was just like stepping into the biosphere, too. The aromas, the smell, the feel. I said, this is it. I called Charlotte and said, you know what? I found it. Let's move to Hilo. And that's kind of how we came to Hilo. And just before we moved here, Richard found out that we were moving, and he offered Charlotte a job working for him as his greenhouse specialist. So we came and Charlotte started working with Richard at the farm, and I brought my work from Arizona. So I was telecommuting before it was even a thing. But you know, yeah, there was a lot of similarities with Hawaii. and I found, I'm originally from Mexico. I found the culture and the lifestyle in Hilo very, very similar to Mexico. This is the closest I felt to home, being away from home. There's a lot of similarities in the culture and the way they respect the Aina, they respect the land, respect the elders. So it's been a real pleasure. There's still a lot that can be done in Hawaii to make things better with respect to energy generation, with respect to food sustainability, self-sustainability, with respect to energy, not energy, but waste recycling and reutilization. And at the same time, I think Hawaii offers you an advantage that it seems to be easier to make a difference. People are very accessible at county and state level, and there is a real interest in protecting the land and in becoming more self-sustainable. And I mean, we are, a lot of people, when we moved here from Arizona, were telling us that we were nuts, that why did we want to move to an island? We're going to get island fever. They say, well, no, if we get island fever, we'll just get off the rock. That was 17 years ago, and we still haven't had even a slight temperature increase. So we love it here. And like I said, I think there's still a lot that can be done for the islands. And we're trying to do everything we can to get involved in that type of work.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
if you have any questions more about the biosphere, I mean, tell me what you'd like to know. What were your questions?
what's the funniest or most embarrassing thing that happened while in the biosphere?
Oh, embarrassing. Well, for one, we were like zoo creatures, you know, because there were tourists allowed to walk around the biosphere. It's all glass, so you're working and there's tourists looking at you like a monkey in the zoo. And so I remember one time I was carrying this big bucket of greens in the farm area, taking to the goats, walking down, like looking really stuffed. And I walked right into a banana bunch hanging right in front of me. Like, whoa, just felt like a whole bunch of kids looking at me. Or another time we were in the ocean. The ocean had a viewing gallery down below where people could look at the ocean from a lower level. And one of our tasks was to go and clean the windows out. And we would be down like attached to a window with a suction cup, scraping down the window. And there were cockroaches everywhere. So like a cockroach would like come out of your BCD and just start swimming out of you, and all the kids in front of you just like freaking out. So it's there was a lot of funny.
Wow.
We try to have a lot of fun. Friday nights we had cliff diving nights, so we go in and jump off of the cliff into the ocean. Management didn't take that very kindly at first, and they were asking us not to do that because it was a liability. And you know, we said, okay, what are you going to do if we don't stop doing it? So we arrange a compromise. Okay, you can do it, but after the last tourists leave the facility. So Fridays afternoons after close down, we go and jump into the ocean. Cultural, it was really interesting because our crew was 7 people, and we had 6 different nationalities. So we had obviously Americans, British, Australian, Mexico, Nepal, and Germany.
Wow.
So very diverse. Just from the cultural perspective, was very diverse. So getting to and this is a place where the people you work with during the day are the people who are going to be sitting across the table from you at night during the dinner time. So interpersonal relationships become critical. I think that's one of the things that NASA is most interested in, and they do that type of research and a lot of the analogs right now is interpersonal relationships. Crew selection is going to be critical for success on another planet. But in our case, you know, for instance, everybody had to cook 1 day a week, and you started with dinner, and then you cooked breakfast, and then lunch the day after. And they were given an allotment of food, and that was what you had to work with for your 3 meals. between all the different nationalities, the food variety was great. We did much better than the first crew. I hope none of them are watching this show right now, but we were better cooks than they were. And I can take them on a separate call if they want to discuss that. But the diversity in nationalities gave us a really rich diversity in food. Like our friend from Nepal, he was a master in handling spices. So he could make spices, make the food taste great. His downside was that his food portions were like samplers. They were like tiny. So like really good small portions. You're starving, so like small amounts. Whereas our German friend, his food was German, but large amounts. So you would leave the table satisfied, but a little bit. So it was in that sense, it was very interesting.
So everybody loved it when it was your night to cook, right? Because nobody is upset when Mexican food is on the table.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, and my wife was really good too because she liked to make calzones. So it was really good too. So yeah, it was, and you had to get very creative because we didn't have sugar, we didn't have oil, so there's no frying. So we had to figure out how to fry without oil, how to sweeten without sugar. So we used bananas. We had bananas in every imaginable way that we could think of, and then some. That was our sweetener. Sweet potatoes. We had so many sweet potatoes. That was a recipe from the first crew. That our skin turned orange from so many beta carotene we were eating. Luckily, the guy from Nepal who was in charge of the agriculture on our crew, and he was able to really increase the diversity of produce that we grew. So we started growing white potatoes, which the first crew was not able to grow, but this guy was able to. Another difference that, for those who are not familiar with the history of the Biosphere too, in a few days, a few weeks after our mission started, there was a management takeover. And the original management was ousted, and an interim management was put in place to try to redefine how the place was going to operate or what was it going to become. The first crew, basically, they were told, you can only grow these items because we know those items will grow. If you try to grow something else and it fails, you'll starve.
Yeah.
So when there was a management takeover, we had several meetings with new management, and they asked, what do we want to do? And that's one of the things that we asked. I said, well, we would like to try different crops, but we'd like to get the guarantee that if we plant white potatoes and they don't work out, you'll supplement us from outside with what would be the equivalent yield. We need to try. That's how the scientific method works. You need to try something, but you don't want to starve people.
Yeah.
So that's how we were able to grow items that the first crew did not have, like white potato, corn, and others. So that was a very positive change in the way that the Biosphere.
Yeah, and you were saying 96% of your food ended up being successful, right?
Yeah. And then another change that we had, which was really valuable, was we started off. So the first crew was working in isolation. It was 8 of them, and no one went in, no one went out. That's it. When the management takeover happened, and they asked us about changes we wanted, one was let them give us a chance to grow extra food. The other one was, why don't we operate this more like a research station would, or a moon station, like where you have a resident crew operating the facility, and then you have visiting crews coming in for a short period of time to do specific research. So that just opened up a whole realm of research opportunities for the Biosphere. So now we had visiting scientists coming in and do their own research while we did the operation of the Biosphere. So it became a lot more efficient. And not only that, but because we had new faces coming in every week, everybody was on their best behavior. So it really boosted the morale of the crew. So for NASA, when they're thinking about Artemis and doing a permanent presence on the moon, they definitely need to think about having, a long-term resident crew with visiting short-term crews to keep that dynamic changing in the crew inside. It was a fabulous experience. Let's say I had to learn about animal husbandry, which never in my wildest dreams I ever thought I was going to be, delivering goats and milking goats every morning. I also was a safety officer, so I had to take a EMT course and become state certified EMT. So those are skills that I carry on with me now. It's skills
Rodrigo,
that are valuable.
where do you think we are, as an island, Hawaii? Where do you think we are? How much time do we have to make life better for Kyoki and Malia? Are we on schedule? Are we behind? What's your thoughts?
Well, it depends what time scale we're talking about. We're talking geological time scale. We got plenty of time. No, I think that the state is definitely moving in the right direction. I wish we could move faster, especially with energy independence. On the energy independence subject, I think we have a wide variety of natural resources that we should be utilizing to achieve, if not full independence from fossil fuels, a much higher independence from fossil fuels. And that is reachable. That is within our reach. I think within 15, 20 years, we should be able to achieve, if not 100% fossil fuel energy independence, pretty close to it, at least to power the islands. We have geothermal, we have wind, we can tap into tidal energy. There's a lot of solar energy. So there's a lot of possibility, and there is the interest from the legislative side and moving towards becoming an energy independent place. So I think in that sense, we're good. This better than probably any of us, and that is with respects to becoming self-sustainable in food production. And I've heard you said this before many times, and you're absolutely right. If the farmer doesn't make money, the farmer is not going to farm. People farm because it's a business. You need to make money. Otherwise, there's no point in farming. Yes, we have tons of land and ideal climate to grow anything we want. But as long as our energy costs are high, our shipping costs are high, and we can't compete against produce being dumped from the mainland or third world countries, it's going to be very hard for farmers to farm. So that kind of links into the energy independence. We can provide affordable and reliable power that can be utilized to produce our own fertilizers or facilitate, provide incentives to the farmers to grow more of our food here. That I think that one, although it may be a simpler task, I think we're farther and it's more complex than achieving energy independence. I think achieving food sustainability is farther away and more complex than energy, just because of the fact, like you say, the farmer needs to make money in order for the farmer to farm. And then there's one that really hurts me, and Brittany knows about this one probably more than anyone, is waste. We can't be using landfills anymore. That's Middle Ages technology. It's incomprehensible that we're still dealing with landfills. It blows my mind that we stopped doing the recycling program just a few years ago because China was on board. Somebody was not buying our plastic and our metals anymore. That didn't stop us from generating the waste. Now, a lot of people say that, we should be a zero waste facility. That is, I think, unrealistic. I think we can reduce the amount of waste we generate, but to become a zero waste, we're with all the packaging that we get with everything we buy, it's going to be very difficult to eliminate the waste. but Brittany has, different approaches on how do we utilize that waste and make them valuable, marketable products. So that one, I also think of those three areas that I mentioned: energy independence, food independence. We can go to food independence because, like I said, the world has become so small that we all want to have our kiwis from Chile and our strawberries from Mexico, and there's stuff that we can grow here that we can bring in from outside. But the basic staples, we should be able to grow them here. So between energy independence, food sustainability, and waste reutilization, I think the waste reutilization is the one that is closest in our grasp. I think we can get that one done in 5 to 10 years. I think energy independence would follow in 15 to 25 years. Food, we really have to get some think tanks going on how we increase food production. How do we help farmers farm? So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think we're in the right track.
Yeah. One thing I did think about, and I think about a lot, is the cost of electricity. Because if we rely on geothermal for the electricity, that cost will stay stable for hundreds, millions of years. So we got to get it done now because we don't really have that much time. Exactly, because the food production, if we can drive that down, it'll help the farmers quite a bit, because they got to make money, right? So anyway, I just wanted to.
Yeah, and it applies for Biosphere 2. The Biosphere 2 was an energy hog. I mean, it required a lot of energy. Being built in Arizona, and it was built in Arizona because of the number of days you get solar radiation. So you need solar energy. You're going to be on another planet. At the same time, the desert is pretty hot. So cooling a facility like the Biosphere required a lot of energy. It was a very energy intensive place. The Biosphere 2 was powered by conventional fossil fuels. We had our own power plant on site that burned diesel and natural gas. But alongside the Biosphere, there's this large berm of dirt that was meant to someday house solar panels. When they built the Biosphere, they built it under the assumption that sometime within that 100-year span that the Biosphere was supposed to be in existence, solar energy was going to become affordable and reliable enough to power the whole Biosphere with solar energy. And the same, if we're going to go to the moon or to Mars or to any other planet, we are going to have to find ways to rely on we're not going to be able to find fossil fuels on the moon or Mars, no matter how hard we try. So we're going to have to find ways to provide the energy requirements for people in those locations. And, Brittany can tell you this more than I can. The amount of technologies that we are currently using right now that have been developed from space technologies is huge. And it continues to provide us with a lot of the commodities and the benefits that we enjoy nowadays. So when people start criticizing the budget for NASA and why are we even looking at colonizing other planets or exploring the outer space, why don't we focus on Earth first? What I tell those people is that they're not mutually exclusive. It's not this or that, and the benefits that we get back from space exploration, space technologies are huge. So there is room for both.
Yeah. There's so many things, right? I mean, memory foam, Velcro, cell phones. I mean, just so many things that we rely on our day-to-day lives have really grown in this space industry.
Cordless power tools.
Yep.
Are space technology.
Yep.
So we need to embrace technology. We need to be cautious of it and how we deploy it. and how we utilize it. And that's one of the things that I really liked about the agriculture process at Biosphere 2 was that it was a high-tech agricultural process based on ancient farming techniques.
Yep.
So we can always learn from the past and take that knowledge from the past and utilize it with today's knowledge and technology.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's a recurring thing that comes up often, right? We produce biochar, for example, in the UNA system. So, this is not something that we've come up with. This is an indigenous, commodity that has been utilized for thousands and thousands of years. And so, as we have conversations about, okay, we have a lot of indigenous knowledge, right? And then we have a lot of groups who are kind of bringing sort of these game-changing, state-of-the-art technologies to the forefront. It's not really a this or that, right? It's really how do we take a hybrid approach, because the ancient and indigenous knowledges help us with a lot of the problems that we've been facing as humanity for a long period of time. And the technological and more, I would say, higher tech approaches, A, could maybe help us in terms of efficiency, but B, help us start tackling some of the issues that haven't been here for as long. So we don't have some of that indigenous knowledge, right? It's when we start looking at what do we do with microplastics and plastic pollution? What are we going to do with pharmaceuticals, right? That are, poisoning our water sources, right? It's problems that haven't been dealt with, massively in the past, because they're problems we've recently created for ourselves, right? And so how do we come up with this kind of hybrid approach and this hybrid system that can marry this beautiful indigenous knowledge to some of these, newer approaches? And how do we bring those home together to find solutions that are truly effective?
Yeah, and you mentioned the biochar. That's a good example. Another perfect example that well about is, that if you look at constructions that were built by the Romans 2,000, 3,000 years ago, they're still standing. They used concrete that was not manufactured the way we manufacture concrete now. Concrete manufacturing right now is one of the highest CO2 producers in the world. And they're, why don't we learn from the Romans, and why don't we come up with alternatives of cement? Also a subject that Brittany is very familiar with. Why don't we come up with cement that will, eliminate the need of baking up, calcium carbonate into calcium hydroxide to release all that CO2 into the atmosphere. There is a lot of ancient knowledge that we can recuperate or reclaim and start to use into our advantage. I feel that when the Industrial Revolution hit, it was such a revolution, that it made people's lives so much easier, so much faster, allowed us to build faster, more, that we lost track of what we were really doing and the damage we were causing. And we just let it run rampant. Yeah. And so it's time to put the brakes down and start thinking, how do we do a more cautious or environmentally aware industrial revolution? How do we improve people's lives without having to sacrifice the health of the planet?
We could do this for another hour, 2 hours, but we're running kind of over time. So, thanks a lot for saying, and sharing with us everything that you have. And Brittany, can you close us off, please?
Yeah, that sounds good. I wanted to say thank you again, Rodrigo and Richard, for joining. This is Inventing Our Future on ThinkTech Hawaii. Thank you, Rodrigo, for joining us, and thank you to our viewers for watching. If you want to get our email advisories or to see a complete listing of our shows, you can sign up for them on thinktechhawaii.com. We'll be back in 2 weeks, so please tune in then, and we'll do a deep dive into our letter C invention. Until then, I'm Brittany Zimmerman.
Thank you so much for watching ThinkTech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please like us and click the subscribe button on YouTube and the follow button on Vimeo. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and donate to us at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.